I lent my husband £50,000, and somehow, his sister ended up owning our house. That sentence still sounds unreal when I say it out loud. Like something you'd hear in a courtroom drama. Not from an ordinary woman like me. Someone who thought love, trust, and hard work were the only currencies that mattered in a marriage. But life has a strange way of teaching you what trust is really worth. When I close my eyes, I can still smell the faint scent of wet paint in that house, our house, the one I helped choose, renovate, and fill with laughter. I remember the echo of my footsteps on the newly laid wooden floors, the afternoon light spilling across the walls like warm honey. That house was more than bricks and mortar to me. It was the promise of a shared future. And to think, all it took was one signature, not even mine, to take it all away. Before any of that happened, before I knew what betrayal felt like in your bones, life was simple, ordinary. I worked part-time at a local design firm, interior styling for small cafes and boutique stores. Nothing glamorous, but I loved it. The colors, the textures, the satisfaction of seeing a space come alive under my hands. My husband, Daniel, worked in property development. Though if you asked him, he'd tell you he was still trying to find his big break. We lived in a small flat just outside Manchester, cluttered but cozy. My savings were tucked away in a separate account, years of work, small bonuses, and a modest inheritance from my late father. Dad always told me, a woman should keep something of her own, not out of mistrust, but out of wisdom. I used to laugh at that. I told him Daniel and I were a team. That marriage meant unity. I wish I could tell him now that he was right, painfully right. Daniel's sister, Claire, was around a lot back then. Too much, if I'm being honest. She was one of those women who entered a room like she was already in charge. Loud laughter, strong perfume, and opinions about everything. She worked in real estate, the ironic twist that would later come back to haunt me. Daniel adored her, said she was the brains of the family. I tolerated her, mostly for his sake. Still, there were cracks, small hairline fractures that only became visible in hindsight. Whenever Daniel and I argued, Claire would somehow appear, a phone call, a drop by, always siding with her brother. Once, during a small dinner party, I remember her saying, half jokingly, "If anything happens to you two, I'd take this house in a heartbeat." She laughed. Daniel laughed, and I laughed too, pretending it didn't sting. But the truth is, it did. The idea to buy a new house started one rainy afternoon. Daniel came home soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead, and this wild energy in his eyes. "May," he said. He always called me that, short for Mayra. "I've found it. The house. The one." I remember smiling before I even knew what he was talking about. That's what love does to you. It makes you believe before you see. He showed me photos on his phone, a charming semi-detached house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it had space, sunlight, and a garden I could already picture myself tending. He said the owner was desperate to sell, that we could get it below market price if we moved quickly. There was just one problem. He didn't have enough liquid cash for the down payment. I did. That $50,000 my father left me. The money I'd promised myself I wouldn't touch unless it was for something meaningful. Daniel held my hands and looked me straight in the eyes. "May, this isn't just a house. It's our start. I'll handle everything, the paperwork, the mortgage, the legal stuff. You just trust me." And I did. I transferred the money within a week. The next few months were a blur of boxes, paint samples, and IKEA runs. Claire came by often, pretending to help but mostly giving opinions. She insisted on being involved in some of the legal coordination, saying it was easier if someone in real estate helped. I didn't question it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal never announces itself with fireworks. It comes quietly, in familiar voices, over cups of tea. The first sign came not long after we moved in. I was in the kitchen, unpacking the last of our dishes, when Claire dropped a comment that made me pause. "So, technically," she said, flipping through some documents on the counter. "The title's still under review, but once it's all sorted, it'll be secure." "Secure," I asked. What do you mean? She smiled in that condescending way of hers. Oh, you know, these legal things. Don't worry, Daniel's got it handled. I should have pressed. I should have asked to see the paperwork myself. But I didn't want to seem distrustful. We'd only just started our new chapter. And besides, a few weeks later, I was in the hospital. It started as a simple fainting spell. I was exhausted, working long hours and managing the move. Daniel insisted I see a doctor, and before I knew it, I was being kept overnight for observation. Nothing serious, the doctors said stress, probably, but what happened while I was away changed everything. I didn't know that as I lay in that sterile white room, an IV in my arm, Claire was across town signing papers that would make her the legal owner of my home. When I returned, Daniel was strangely distant. The house looked slightly different. A few of my things had been moved. The spare room had new curtains. Claire had been there, helping, he said. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something inside me felt wrong, like I was stepping into someone else's life. 3 weeks later, the letter came, a thick white envelope on the doormat, marked with the estate agency logo I'd seen 100 times in Claire's car. Notice, to vacate. My hands went numb. I thought it was a mistake, a cruel prank. But when I looked at the fine print, my name wasn't there. The house was listed under Claire Matthews. I stared at it for a long time before whispering to myself, how? The walls around me felt like they were shrinking. That was the day I learned that trust, once broken, doesn't shatter, it dissolves, quietly, into disbelief. And I knew, right then, that the woman I had been, the one who trusted too easily, was gone. I sat on the kitchen floor with that eviction letter trembling in my hands. The clock above the stove ticked loudly, every second slicing through the silence like a blade. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, as if mocking the storm gathering inside me. I kept reading the letter over and over, hoping my eyes were deceiving me. Claire Matthews, sole proprietor. The name burned into my mind. I felt sick, like my stomach had folded into itself. When Daniel came home that evening, I didn't greet him with the usual smile or hug. I just held up the letter. He froze mid-step, his expression flickered, guilt, fear, something else. Then he forced a laugh. Oh, that, he said casually, dropping his keys onto the counter. It's just a mix-up. May. Claire was helping us process the paperwork. I'll sort it out. A mix-up, I repeated quietly. Daniel, why is her name on the ownership documents? Why isn't it ours? He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and avoided my eyes. It's just temporary. For tax reasons. You know Claire's in real estate. She knows these things. It's easier to process through her name for now. The words made no sense. For now, Daniel, I gave you my inheritance money. That house was supposed to be ours. Why would you let anyone, even your sister, sign her name on it? He looked at me then, finally, his expression hardening. You're overreacting, I said. I'll handle it. Trust me. But trust felt like a word I didn't recognize anymore. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing my father's voice. Keep something of your own, May. I thought I was keeping love. I didn't realize how easily love could be weaponized. In the days that followed, Daniel's behavior grew distant. He'd leave early, come back late, sometimes reeking of cheap whiskey. Claire stopped by frequently, always with an excuse, just checking on the bills, or making sure the renovations are progressing smoothly. One afternoon, while she was in the kitchen making tea, I noticed a document poking out of her leather folder on the counter. My name caught my eye. I didn't mean to snoop, but something primal in me needed to know. The document was a property transfer form already signed. The buyer's name read Claire Matthews. The seller's Daniel Matthews. My own husband had sold the house to his sister. I felt dizzy. I slid the paper back in before she noticed, my heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear her humming. That evening, I confronted Daniel again. You sold it, I said quietly, my voice trembling. You sold our house to her. He didn't even pretend to be surprised this time. He just exhaled sharply, like he'd been waiting for the moment. "It's not what you think," he said. "Then tell me what it is." "She's helping us. It's a temporary sale, a way to stabilize things until we refinance." I stared at him, searching for the man I once knew. "Daniel, do you hear yourself? You used my money, my inheritance, and now your sister owns our home. Do you even realize what you've done?" He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "You don't understand how business works, May. I'm doing this for us." "No," I whispered. "You're doing this for you." He stood there for a long time, jaw tight, eyes cold. Then he walked away without another word. That was the first night he didn't come home. Days turned into weeks, and everything began to unravel. Letters started arriving, mortgage notices, insurance changes, bank statements addressed not to me, not even to Daniel, but to Claire. When I called the bank to ask about the loan, they said politely that they couldn't discuss details with none. That word cut deeper than anything Daniel had said. I had gone from being a wife, a partner, a co-owner of dreams, to an outsider in my own home. One morning, Claire showed up unannounced. She was wearing a crisp white suit and sunglasses, holding a clipboard like she was conducting business. "May," she said smoothly, "I'm sorry things have been complicated. But I think it's best if we make this transition easy for everyone." I stared at her. "Transition?" She sighed dramatically, as though this were hard for her. "You know the situation, love. The bank's calling in the mortgage. Daniel's missed payments, and since my name's on the deed, it's my responsibility now." "Responsibility," I repeated, voice shaking. "You stole this from me." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, come on. You and Daniel made your choices. I just made sure the property didn't go under." I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead, I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound that scared even me. "You really think this will end well for you?" I said quietly. "You can take the house, Claire, but you can't erase what you've done. You can't steal peace." Her face twitched, just for a second, before she regained that fake calm. "We'll see about that." She turned and left, her heels clicking like gunshots against the fluoride chosen tile for the same fluoride scrubbed clean every weekend, believing it was ours. That night, I packed a small bag and went to stay with my friend Leela. She lived a few streets away, a single mother, with 2 kids and a heart big enough to fit me in without question. She didn't say "I told you so." She just handed me tea and let me cry into my hands. "May," she said gently, "you have to fight this. You can't let them take everything." "I don't even know where to start," I whispered. He was the one handling everything, every paper, every form. I trusted him. Lila took my hand. "Then start there. Stop trusting the wrong people." Over the next few days, I went through every document I could find, old emails, bank receipts, text messages. I pieced together the timeline like a detective in my own marriage. What I discovered made me sick. The property had been purchased under Daniel's name, but the transfer to Claire had been initiated only 2 days after I was admitted to the hospital. My husband had literally waited until I was lying in a hospital bed to sell the house out from under me. And he'd done it for cash. I found the account statement. The deposit landed in his account the same week I was discharged. £48,000. Nearly the exact amount I'd lent him. That was the moment the love finally died. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculation. Cold, deliberate theft dressed up as help. I looked around the empty guest room where I was staying and realized something that both broke me and rebuilt me at the same time. I had lost the house, yes, but I still had my story, my truth. And I was going to make sure everyone, including Daniel and Claire, heard it. 2 days later, I decided to face Daniel, not as a wife begging for answers, but as a woman who deserved the truth. He was staying at the house still, my house, with the curtains drawn and his car parked crookedly across the driveway. I stood at the front gate for a long minute, clutching my bag, breathing in the faint scent of roses I'd planted last spring. They were wilting now, neglected, like everything else he'd touched. When I finally knocked, it was Claire who answered. She looked surprised to see me, then amused. "Oh, you actually came back. I need to talk to my husband," I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "He's busy." "Then tell him his wife is here." That word made her flinch, even just slightly. She hesitated, then turned back inside. I could hear their voices, muffled, tense. Then Daniel appeared. He looked rough, unshaven, tired, eyes bloodshot. But there was no remorse there, only irritation, as though I were some inconvenience he'd hoped would disappear. "May," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "This isn't a good time." "Then make it one." I pushed past him into the house before he could stop me. The air smelled stale, of alcohol and dust. The living room was a mess, take-out boxes, empty bottles, and a pile of unopened letters on the table. "This was supposed to be our home, Daniel," I said, turning to face him. "And now you've turned it into this." He rubbed his face, sighing. "May, please. I told you, things just got complicated. I was trying to fix it. By selling it to your sister behind my back," I shot back. "By lying to me while I was in a hospital bed." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand." "No," I snapped. "I do understand now. You used me. You took my money, my trust, and when I was at my weakest, you sold everything we built together. For what, Daniel? Tell me what was worth destroying your marriage for." He looked away, silent. And then Claire's voice came from behind him. "Don't make this dramatic, May. It's just a house." I turned slowly to face her. "Just a house." My voice trembled. "Do you even know what this house meant to me? I grew up dreaming of a place that was safe, hours filled with laughter and family. You didn't just steal walls and bricks, you stole years of my life." She smirked faintly. "Well, maybe next time. Don't hand over your money without reading the fine print." That did it. The pain turned to fire. "You're proud of this? Of ruining your brother's life? Because believe me, Claire, when people find out what you've done, you'll wish you'd never signed that paper." Her smirk vanished. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," I said coldly. Daniel stepped between us, raising his hands. "Enough, both of you." But I wasn't done. "Tell me the truth, Daniel," I said, my voice low now, trembling with fury. "Was any of it real? The house, the marriage, us, was it ever real?" He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw it. The truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need words. No love, no guilt. Just exhaustion and regret, but not for what he'd done, for getting caught. I felt something inside me finally break, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't despair this time. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, final. I took a deep breath and said, "You know what, Daniel? Keep the house, keep the lies. You'll need something to live in when the guilt finally eats you alive." And then I walked out. It took me 3 months to rebuild my life. Leela let me stay in her spare room until I found a small flat of my own. It wasn't fancy, just 1 bedroom, a tiny balcony, and a view of the street, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture I bought with my own hands. Every cup, every curtain, every plate was proof that I didn't need anyone to give me a home again. But the story wasn't over. Because one morning, I got a call from a lawyer. "Mrs. Matthews," he asked politely. "My name is Andrew Patel. I'm representing a client involved in a dispute with Mr. Daniel Matthews. It seems you might want to hear what's happening." My heart skipped. "What dispute?" He hesitated. "It appears Daniel attempted to sell the property again, this time without his sister's consent. But since the title's still under her name, she's pressing charges for fraud." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was poetic, in the darkest way possible. The siblings who had stolen everything from me were now tearing each other apart over the same house. I thanked the lawyer, hung up, and sat by my window, sipping tea. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace, because sometimes, karma doesn't need your help. It knows exactly where to find the guilty. A few weeks later, I went back to the neighborhood, not to confront them, but to say goodbye. The house was empty now, the windows boarded up, the for sale sign crooked on the lawn. Even the roses were gone, just dry, brown stems poking from the dirt. I stood there quietly, remembering the woman I used to be, naive, hopeful, so desperate to build something perfect that she ignored every red flag. Then I whispered to the wind, "Thank you, because losing that house taught me something no love story ever could. That home isn't built from bricks and money. It's built from peace, from respect, from the courage to walk away." 6 months later, I started a podcast, Letters I Never Sent. Each episode, I told stories about people who had trusted the wrong hands, who'd lost everything but still found the strength to begin again. It grew faster than I expected. People wrote in, sharing their stories, women, men, even couples who'd been through betrayal, loss, and survival. They all said the same thing: "I thought I was alone until I heard you." And that's when I realized, maybe that was the reason for everything. Maybe I was meant to lose my house so I could help others rebuild theirs, in ways that truly mattered. Not with money, but with healing. A year to the day after it all fell apart, I received a small brown envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, the old house, now renovated, with a handwritten note on the back. "Guess you were right. You can't steal peace, Claire." I smiled. For the first time, not out of pain, but forgiveness. Because when people finally face the weight of their choices, that's punishment enough. I set the photo on my shelf beside a small framed quote that had carried me through it all. "You don't lose when you let go. You lose when you hold on to what was breaking you." And that's how my story ends. Not with revenge, but with release. Because sometimes, the best kind of justice is moving on, quietly, gracefully, while they're still stuck in the ruins they built themselves. 3 years have passed since the house, the betrayal, the endless nights of wondering where I went wrong. Now, I live in a small coastal town in Devon. My mornings begin with the sound of gulls and the smell of salt in the air. I write from my kitchen window, the same place where I can see the waves shifting with the wind. Never still, always changing. There's peace here. Not the kind that's loud or proud, but the kind that feels earned. The kind that sits quietly in your chest and whispers, "You made it." My podcast, Letters I Never Sent, has grown far beyond anything I ever imagined. We crossed 1 million listeners last month. It still amazes me the way strangers trust me with their most fragile truths. Every message reminds me that healing isn't something you find in isolation. It's something you build together, word by word, story by story. Most days, I barely think of Daniel or Claire anymore. They became ghosts in my life, distant, faded, irrelevant. But life has a strange way of testing the peace you've built, doesn't it? Because one morning, as I sorted through the mail, I found an envelope that made my hands tremble. It was official-looking thick cream paper, my name written in looping blue ink. The return address said, Law Offices of Patel & Co. For a moment, my breath caught. I hadn't heard from that lawyer since the property case years ago. I sat at the table, tea steaming beside me, and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter and a key. "Dear Mrs. Matthews, I hope this finds you well. I am writing to inform you that the property located at 22 Willow Crescent has recently completed its legal proceedings. As part of a final settlement, following the case between Daniel and Claire Matthews, the house has reverted to your name, in recognition of the funds originally provided by you for its purchase. Enclosed is the new deed and key. Warm regards. Andrew Patel." For a full minute, I just stared at the page. The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I wasn't sure what I felt. Not happiness, exactly. More like disbelief, closure, maybe even grace. After all these years, the house that once represented betrayal and loss was legally mine again. But what does one do with ghosts, returned in brick form? I drove down the following week. It felt strange, like revisiting a wound that had long scarred over. The road to Willow Crescent looked smaller than I remembered, the hedges overgrown. When I reached number 22, I stopped the car and just looked at it. The house had changed. New paint, a trimmed lawn, fresh flowers in the front bed. Someone had lived here, loved here, perhaps tried to forget the same way I once did. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was still, faintly scented with paint and dust. The living room was empty, bare floors, sunlight pooling across them. I walked slowly from room to room, remembering where the dining table once stood, where Daniel used to read the paper, where we'd argued, laughed, dreamed. But it didn't hurt anymore. Not the way it used to. It was as though I was walking through someone else's memories, a woman I used to be but had long outgrown. Upstairs, in what used to be our bedroom, I found a single envelope resting on the windowsill. No dust, no seal, as if someone had placed it there recently. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside, there was just one handwritten note. Ma'am, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I finally see what I did. Claire passed away last year. She left a letter for me. She said she regretted everything. The house was never the problem. I've been sober for 18 months. I don't know if this means anything to you, but I wanted you to have what should have always been yours. I hope you're happy, Daniel. For a long time, I stood there, holding that note, feeling every ghost finally loosen its grip. I didn't cry. I didn't curse him. Instead, I whispered softly to the empty room, "Thank you." Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did to you. It's about freeing yourself from what they left behind. I left the note on the sill, closed the door, and walked away. Now, that house sits quietly on the market again, not because I want revenge, but because I've outgrown it. I'll never live there. It belongs to a past that taught me too much to repeat. Instead, I donated the proceeds from the sale to a charity that helps women rebuild after financial and emotional abuse. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every ending can be rewritten into someone else's beginning. Sometimes, the justice we crave isn't about punishment, it's about purpose. Tonight, as I sit by the sea with a cup of tea, the waves crash softly against the rocks. My microphone glows beside me, recording the next episode of my podcast. I start speaking, my voice calm, steady, familiar. They say home is where the heart is. But I've learned that home isn't a place you find, it's a piece you create. I lost everything I thought mattered, only to realize that what mattered most was me. I pause, smiling to myself. Would you have gone back for the house? Or would you have walked away like I did? The question hangs in the quiet air, drifting out toward the listeners I'll never see, but who, like me, know what it means to lose and rebuild. I've learned that betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes, it comes quietly, hidden behind a familiar face and a reassuring smile. When I lent my husband that money, I thought I was building our future. I thought trust was enough to keep a home standing. But what I've come to understand is this: a house built on deceit will always collapse, no matter how beautiful the walls look from the outside. There were days I wanted revenge. Days I wanted them to hurt like I did. But every time I imagined it, it felt hollow, like a wound I kept reopening just to prove I was still bleeding. So instead, I chose something else. I chose peace. I chose purpose. Forgiveness, I've realized, isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the story they wrote for you and writing your own instead. If you've ever been betrayed, lied to, or robbed of something you worked hard for, please know this: you are not broken. You are not foolish for trusting. The fact that you loved deeply means you lived honestly, and that is something betrayal can never take away. One day, you'll look back at the person who hurt you and feel nothing, not anger, not sadness, just quiet understanding. Because by then, you'll have outgrown the pain. And when that moment comes, you'll finally see what I did. That peace isn't what they give you after the storm, it's what you build from the wreckage yourself. So tell me, if it were your house, your husband, would you fight for what was lost? Or would you start again, just to prove you could?